It's good to see you all. You may not have known, or you may not have known. I was with Patch in South Africa for a few weeks, celebrating Dave and Lisa getting married, and turning it into a little bit of a holiday as well. I also did skydive. I haven't got video evidence, and I wasn't getting sponsorship forms or sponsors. But thinking about it, if anyone doesn't actually want to donate any money towards me, that is absolutely fine. I won't reject those. We can make room for that. I just believe in the spirit of generosity. So it's like if anyone wants to do that, just come and see me at the end of it. We can sort something out. I actually double front flipped out of the plane, so maybe I should get some more money than Patch did. But then that was probably one of the most surreal experiences of my life. Usually when I'm in a plane, the only time I ever want to get out of it is when it's safely on the ground, landed, and we're at the airport, and the stewards open the doors to you saying thank you for flying us now leave the plane. But at this point I'm freely jumping out of a plane, which is a bit of an experience. We did quite a few amazing things that day. I got to go shark cage diving, which was bizarre and crazy. I never thought I'd actually want to get in the water with a massive 20-foot shark with nothing but really chicken wire to keep me safe. Whilst there's a little native African man teasing the shark with a giant fish head on a bit of rope pulling it towards you. So I mean, and then the shark smashing into the cage and people panicking. I mean, there is someone who you may all know. His name was Matt Boyle. Matt usually likes to come across as a sort of like a man's man. He's nothing really scares him. But on this one occasion, when we're in the cage, he's next to me, and then there's two girls, and there's David and Ian, and we're there. And the shark takes this rope, it gets hold of this rope and takes it under the boat, and the boat's kind of tipping over a little bit, and it's getting a little like, ooh, it's a little bit scary, but it's not too bad. And Matt, in a really panicky voice, which I can't actually put on for you, I wish I could, but in a really panicky voice, whilst clinging to the arm of the girl next to him, who he didn't know, by the way, starts screaming, please, let us out now. He starts panicking, he's hitting the cage. It was quite funny. And I was as cool as you like, obviously. Yeah, obviously I wasn't panicking at all inside, thinking we're going to die. And then we also got to climb Table Mountain. Now that was difficult. I mean, when we started, I was thinking Table Mountain would be like a little hill, and there'd be like a nice little track that would take us up like a paved track with handlebars that we can hold on to, and we can walk stuff and it'll be fine. It was anything but that. I mean, 20 minutes in, and this is nowhere like I was crawling up the mountain. I was on all fours, literally crawling, panting. My legs were shaking. It was like sheer rock faces, like vertical land. And we got to the top and we thought, don't worry, when we finally get to the top, we can get the cable car back down. No, we couldn't. The cable car wasn't working that day, and we had to walk all the way back down again, the same one. I mean, the view from the top was very, very nice, but it's a pretty tiring walk. But I'm glad to be back with you guys. And I want you to turn the person next to you and say you're looking good. And they can talk about that person until never talk to me again. I don't know if he's speaking to me. I appreciate this. But one thing I did do, when I was in South Africa, which I categorically said I was never going to do before we left, was surfing. And that's not because I dislike surfing, that's just because after and before I'd seen all these sharks in the water, I thought there's no way I'm going to sit on a surfboard in a wetsuit looking like a seal, just floating there with a shark bait for a while. But when in Rome, and all that, everyone's there and everyone's saying let's do it, you see people out there doing it and surfing and it all looks so good, so I thought, you know what, I'll give it a try. And so I go and I rent up a little wetsuit and my surfboard, and I've got all the gear but definitely no idea. I haven't got a clue what I'm doing, so walking down to the shore, and you just, everyone else is out there, make it look really easy, and we stay really close to the shore to start with. And it doesn't take long before we start getting the hang of it. We start getting used to, okay, well, if you lie like this, you can start going along the wave, and then if you stand up, you can start standing like this, and you can balance okay. And once you're close to the shoreline, by the way, when I say close to the shoreline, I'm talking like I wasn't going any higher than like thigh height in the water. And I was making sure I could see like a good 20 foot around me, because I didn't want like any fish with teeth and a fin coming anywhere near me. So as soon as I seen that, I was going to be out there, I was going to be gone. But we're staying close to the shoreline. It didn't take long before we started to look pretty good at doing it. And you could be alright safely in the shore. If you fell off the board, you could stand straight back up. There was no chance you can drown or anything like that. You're all safe. And I started to realise actually to do it properly, to actually surf how you meant to, and to actually get better at it, you actually had to go out farther. You actually had to go out past these smaller waves, through the bigger waves. You had to go out to where you actually couldn't touch the bottom, and to where you had to float around. And that was a scary thing. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a try. I'm actually going to try and do this. So I started walking out there, and as soon as I started trying to go out, I just come against just opposition, massive waves. We're talking like 10-foot waves bigger than this building, hitting into me. Every time I was like 10 spaces forward, I was like taking like 20 spaces back by this wave, and it was so tiring, man. Like every single time you got through one set of waves, like more waves just come and knocked into you, and it got to the point where I thought, why am I even bothering to try and walk through this? Why am I even? I was like, I'm just swallowing copious amounts of seawater. I'm almost drowning. I look like a fool because I just keep on trying to walk forward, and then next thing you know, you just like, oh, there's Callum again. He just goes flying back on this wave through the air. I just thought, why are we even trying this? I think I just want to start by reading something from the Bible. So if anyone's got a Bible, I want you to just wave it in the air. Wave your Bible. If it's glowing and if it's on a phone, that's absolutely fine. I believe in technology. I think it's good. I don't think it's from the devil. It's all good. I want you to look at the person's Bible next to you and just ask them if you can just inspect it. And if it's got more than 4 highlighted passages in there, you sit next to someone who is pretty holy. If it's got 9, tell them to start highlighting it and start reading it and actually start using it. But we're going to be reading from 2 Kings. This is Old Testament. For anyone in here who's not too sure, so this is back at the start of the Bible. We're going 2 Kings. We're going to chapter 13. I'm going to start reading from verse 14 to verse 20. And basically we're looking at the life of Elisha. Now Elisha was a prophet who was mentored by a guy called Elijah. And Elisha, the book we're going to be reading is towards the end of his life. He's had a really great ministry, and now he's pretty ill, and we're looking at Elisha's last prophecy. And it says in verse 14, it says, now Elisha had been suffering from an illness from which he died. Jehoshaphat, king of Israel, went down to see him and wept over him. My father, he cried, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. Elisha said, get a bow and some arrows. And he did so. Take the bow in your hands, he said to the king of Israel. And when he had taken it, Elisha put his hands on the king's hands. Open the east window, he said, and he opened it. Shoot, Elisha said, and he shot. The Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Aram, Elisha declared. You will completely destroy the Arameans in Aphek. Then he said, take the arrows, and the king took them. Elisha told him, strike the ground. He struck the ground 3 times and stopped. The man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times, and he would have defeated the Aram and completely destroyed it. But now you only defeated 3 times. Verse 20, Elisha died and was buried. Just a little debate. It just had this massive, this guy who was raising the dead, and this guy who was doing all this stuff, and then suddenly he just says his one prophecy, and then in verse 20 he just says Elisha died and was buried. This guy had this massive, amazing life, fruitful life, and suddenly it just says he was angry at some guy, and he died and was buried. And when I was reading this, I was like, why the heck is he getting angry at the king of Israel? I was like, he's done what he's asked him to. He shot an arrow out the window. And then Elisha says to him, pick up the arrows and strike the ground. So the king picks up the arrows and he strikes the ground. He hits the ground, and then Elisha starts getting really angry at him. I'm like, well, you didn't tell him how many times to strike. You just told him to strike the ground, and he did. And I think something that helped me understand this was a bit of historical context and a bit of historical background. I think it would help us all just to understand this passage a bit more. So the king of Israel, he may well have known that the amount of times you strike the ground would represent the number of victories you would have. So the amount of times you would have struck the ground back then in this culture would have represented the number of victories you would have won. And typically in this culture, you wouldn't defeat an opponent by just attacking them once. It would typically take 5 or 6 attacks before you would totally destroy someone. So one attack and you would kind of, that's a start. 2 or 3 and you're going to start to subdue them and push them back. But to actually have total victory and to totally destroy them, you would have had to have had about 5 or 6 battles. So when Elisha sees a king only strike the ground 3 times, he's probably thinking, what on earth are you doing? Is that all you've got? You've got the God of victory. You've got the God of your people on your side, and all as you want is partial victory. When you have total victory available for you, all as you actually want is just partial victory. And I think what the king did here can be like what us Christians can do sometimes. And we can simply be content with surviving the world. We can get caught up in the comfort of our current reality. We can get we can have the difficulties and the opposition that comes against us just make us stay close to the shore, and we can just get caught up in just actually trying to get by. But God didn't raise you, or God didn't call you, God didn't grace you, God didn't purpose you just to survive the world. He actually called you to change the world through the power of His movement, which is the church. And I think we can be doing, a lot of time we can be doing what God told you to do. You can, but you're only just kind of doing it. You can be showing up but not really actually showing up. You can be in ministry and you can be doing what you should be doing, but you're not doing it with the same passion, or with the same passion that you used to do it with, or with the same passion that you should be doing it with. You see, I think we can become so overwhelmed by the battles that you've just settled for your current place. Like the king of Israel there, he becomes so overwhelmed by the battles that he was facing that he just settled for his current place, you see. But God doesn't want you to stay where you are. He hasn't called you to stay there. God doesn't want you to camp in your current, where you currently are, because God wants you to, God's got a vision for you to go elsewhere. God's got more than what is already happening. God's got more than where you actually already are. God doesn't want you to stay where you are. He wants to take you to another place. See, we can get stuck in our current reality, but I think God wants us to be open to move into His vision for us. I think God's calling you into a new land. I think God's calling us as a church into a new land, and as a people into a new land, not just to stay where we have been, but to actually go to where He wants us to go. And see, I believe tonight that God's going to be asking people, and He's been asking me this, and I think He's going to be asking maybe just a few of us here tonight, but why have you stopped pounding the ground? Why have you stopped moving forward? Why have you given up and actually going further? And why would you stop moving on? Why would you stop going when you serve the God of Ephesians 3:20? Why would you stop when you serve the God who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to His power, according to the power that works within us? So you know what? I think the king of Israel stopped striking the ground after 3 times. Because he knew that every victory he would win meant another battle he would have to face. I think he stopped striking around because he knew that every victory he would win meant that another battle he would have to go into. See, and I want to tell you tonight, don't stop striking the ground because you're tired of fighting the battles. See, there's more for you to do. God has more planned for you, and you've been given a light that needs shining. See, something that can happen is when we're all together on a Sunday in church, we can all be shining our light. We can all be, doing what we're meant to be doing, and just in the shallows, just getting by. But then when we get into the week and we get into our everyday world, and when opposition comes and when battles come, we tend to turn the light off because then it's less difficult for us. When the opposition starts to come in, I think a lot of time we just get pushed back by it, and we just actually get content and just actually stay where we are. But you see, the only time a light ever works is actually in the darkness. You see, your light is most effective when it is dark. So when you feel overwhelmed by the constant battles, keep your light on, because you have because when you have your light on, it attracts other people to you, and then it always shows you actually which way you're heading. I want to talk about Joshua for a second. Joshua and the Israelites on their way to the promised land, the land which God promised them. On the way there, Joshua had to face 31 different kings. On his way to the promised land, Joshua had to go through 31 different kings. And that is a heck of a lot of people to go through on the way to the promised land which God has given you. And what do you think? Do you think sometimes that he thought that all these battles, all these kings that he faced, did you ever think like he felt like he was going to he wanted to give up and stop? I think he did. But you see, we don't allow the constant battles to keep you where you are. See, if Joshua and the Israelites allowed the constant battles to actually keep them where they were and actually stop them from pushing forward, they would have never have entered that promised land. You see, you need to know something tonight that, and it's something really simple, but it's something that is just, it just helps us in everything. And in 2 seconds I'll tell you what it is. This is probably the most profound bit of preaching you'll ever hear right now. You can laugh if you want, it's not illegal to. But here is the amazing bit of news, is Jesus is on your side. I don't know that, but Jesus is actually on your side. See, he has promised you victory so we can walk in his victory. You see, whenever you move forward, whenever someone pioneers something, whenever someone actually starts to try and take ground, they always come against opposition. All the time, whenever someone moves forward, whenever someone tries to do something, they will always face opposition. And someone who constantly faced opposition, even though he was doing the right things, was Paul. And I want to read a passage in Acts, so it's Acts 20, verse 22 to 24. And Paul is someone who was constantly always being led by God, and he was always constantly moving forward and trying to take new ground, and he was always constantly going forward in the things of God, but he constantly come against opposition. Look what he says. In Acts 20, 22 to 24, he says, "And now, compelled by the Spirit, I'm going to Jerusalem." So, first of all, again, God's leading him somewhere, and he's going. He's going to start moving forward. He's going to start going to another place. He's going to keep on following God. Then look what happens. He says, "Not knowing what will happen to me there, I only know that in every city the Holy Spirit warns me that prison and hardships are facing me." So here's Paul. He's actually doing what God's asked him to do. He's actually doing what God's called him to do. But yet, what's going to face him? Opposition, hardship, persecution. But look what he says after that. He says, "However, I consider my life worth nothing to me. My only aim is to finish the race and complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me, the task of testifying the good news of God's grace." One minute. Stay with me. My back's probably better to look at. The back of my head is probably better to look at than the front of my head anyway, so that's alright. We'll turn around. So, Paul just said this, and I'm thinking, I was like, when I read that, I was like, wow. I was like, Paul knows he's going to face hardship, but Paul understands that what he's a part of is actually bigger than the part he plays. See, Paul understands that actually the cause in which he's doing it for gives him the ability to keep on doing it. You see, when you understand the reason behind what you're doing, it gives you the ability to keep pushing on. See, what we do, our cause should not be for our own benefit, but actually for the cause of Christ. And see, whenever you take ground, whenever you move forward, you will always face opposition. Why? Because of what can be accomplished. Because of what can be planned. The reason why we face opposition when people try and move forward and take stuff is because of what can be accomplished. Because you see, you can't build something without land to build it on. You can't actually build a new building without land. You can't plant new seeds without more land to plant the seeds in. You see, every time you win more ground, you take on more opposition. Because the best way for the devil to stop God's cause moving forward on this earth, the best way for him to actually slow down his kingdom is actually to stop you from going forward. You see, because God uses you, God in his amazing grace has decided to use us to move forward and take that. And the easiest way for the devil to stop that is actually to bring opposition against you and to actually bring battles against you, so it tires you out and so you just get content with staying where you are, so keep on going forward. See, I want to tell you tonight that I just want to tell you, don't stop pounding the ground. Don't stop pounding. See, you're doing great, right? You're doing great. I feel like people in there, there's someone there, and you're doing great. You're being faithful, but don't stop where you are. Have the faith to go deeper, okay? Amen. Because the things that got you here actually won't get you to the next place. You see, there's more victory in store for you, but to get there, you've got to keep on moving forward for it. If you're just content with staying where you are, you're not gonna get it. And I feel that God is actually asking us, how much victory do you want? See, do you want partial victory? Do you just want, just partial victory, and are you just going to be content with just staying where you are? Or do you want total victory? I think God's telling us to keep pounding. You see, the God who has overcome the world is on your side. John 16, verse 33, it says, "I have told you these things, so in me you may have peace." It says, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, for I have overcome the world." That's Jesus who's saying that. He's saying, in this world you'll have opposition. In this world things will come against you. In this world things will get difficult. In this world you'll feel like stopping when you try and move forward from me. But take heart, for I have actually overcome the world. See, the person who has overcome the world, for the person who has overcome everything that can be thrown at you, is actually on your side. And I think we need to pound some more, man. We need to pick back up those arrows, And we need to start pounding around. See, God hasn't finished with you yet. And I tell you tonight, you may think that you've got to a place where, okay, I'm pretty content now. But I tell you, God's not finished with you yet. God's not finished. You're still here. God hasn't finished with you. So don't think He has. Keep going forward. I want to ask you, who's your faith in tonight? Because if your faith is in Jesus, then you need to keep on going forward. Because God wants to take you further. Don't allow the opposition and battles that come against you to keep you from moving forward. So don't get comfortable in your current reality. I think it's easy for us sometimes to get comfortable in our current reality because we see the things around us and we see what can be in front of us, and what in front of us can seem scary and difficult. And where we are now, it's comfortable. We're doing some good things. We're being good Christians. We're being good people, and we get comfortable in that. But that's not God's vision for you. You see, where you are now isn't where you're going to be in God's vision. Where you are now isn't where He wants you to stay. Where you are now isn't where He wants you to settle. You see, God didn't want Joshua and the Israelites to settle somewhere in the desert. He wanted them to settle in the promised land. See, God doesn't want you to settle right here where you are right now. He wants you to settle in His promised land to you, in His new land, in His vision for you. You see, but when I was getting through the waves when I was surfing, it was difficult. The further I got out, the deeper the water got. I was always trying to rely on my own feet to keep me walking. And every time I got a little bit farther, I was on my tiptoes, and the water was getting murkier. I was hearing the Jaws theme tune music more and more, and I just kept on going, and I was swallowing more and more water. And it just got harder and harder and harder to keep on walking. And I realised at one point, I was like, you know what, I'm going to have to get on this surfboard now. And to get on this surfboard, I'm going to have to start paddling. So on I go, I climb onto the surfboard with a bit of difficulty on my head. I did fall over a few times, and it did whack me in my face once, which did hurt. But man, I got on the surfboard and I'm paddling through. And then when these waves come, when you're actually on the surfboard and you're paddling, believe it or not, you can actually just glide straight over the waves. Or you just let the wave come, you just float over it, and you carry on going. And it made it so much easier. And you see, when I finally got out to where I needed to be, to actually where all the other guys were surfing, the real pros, I want you to see, once I got out there, I realised something. I realised that the board actually always floats. The surfboard that I'm on actually always floats. It never goes under the water, it always floats. And actually, even if I fall off the surfboard, I'm always attached to it, because when you go surfing, you have like a bit of rope that comes from the board and you attach it to your leg. So even if you fall off and you're floating around in the water not knowing what's going on, you can always pull this rope and the surfboard comes straight back and you get straight back onto that raised surfboard that's always floating. Even if you can't touch the floor, you can always float on the surfboard. And then when you have your little glory moment where you are actually getting to surf and you're there and you're sitting there floating, and whilst I was sitting there floating, by the way, I was like, the Jaws music was like heavily in my head, and I was like dun 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 dun, and out the corner of my eye, I was seeing fins left, right, and centre. And I was sitting there at one point, and I seen this black thing out the corner. I panicked. I started paddling really quickly, and I turned around. There was a tiny little bird just sitting there, floating in the water, and I was like, goodness sake. But when you finally get your little bit of surfing on the go, and you actually stand up and you're riding away, I remember looking down, and I was thinking, look what I'm standing on. I'm standing on this board that's floating, and I'm actually standing on this board which is now allowing me to ride over the very waves which earlier on were actually coming against me. I'm actually knocking against me, and I'm actually trying to take me out. The very waves, the very opposition that I had earlier on, I'm now floating right over top of them. I'm now gliding right over top of them. And you see, in life, we stand on the one who has overcome the world. See, we stand on the one who is above all. And I just want to tell you something really important. You see, when you trust Jesus and you keep moving forward, when you keep pounding the ground, He will elevate you above the very things that are coming against you. I'll say it again. So when you trust Jesus and you keep moving forward, you're not stopping, but you're moving forward, and you keep pounding the ground, not just 3 times, not just for partial victory, but you're pounding 5 or 6 times for total victory. When you keep pounding the ground, when you keep moving forward, He will elevate you above the very things that are coming against you. You see, give yourself fully to the cause of Christ. See, God has decided to use you. If you don't be put off by the size of the waves and the deepness of the water. He's keeping you afloat. I realise that. See, I want to tell you tonight, don't forget who you're attached to. Don't forget who you're attached to, and don't forget who you're standing on. For me, I was attached to a surfboard that was floating and that was stopping me from drowning in the water, and the surfboard that I was standing on, which was making me ride above these waves that were smashing me back. You see, Jesus is with you. See, I want to say, don't stop pounding the ground. Don't stop moving forward. And don't get comfortable just surviving where you are. See, it's time for people tonight, it's time for us as a church, it's time for us as people to pick back up the arrows and start pounding again. It's time for us to start pushing forward. It's time for us to keep on walking again. You see, and that thing that was pushing you back will be the very thing that you ride over. I promise you, when you start trusting God, when you start moving forward, those very things that were coming against you, when you look back, will be the very things that you ride straight over the top of. See, it's time for us to go deeper, I believe, as a church and as a people. I think it's time to get out of our current reality, to stop setting up, to pack down the tent, because God doesn't want you to look at the roof of your tent that you set up. Like Abraham, in the Old Testament, Abraham had set up his tent, and he was sitting there, and God gave him a vision, and God told him he was going to make his descendants as numerous as the stars. But Abraham wasn't listening to him. He was sat there in his tent, in this temporal tent, and he was thinking this was his life, and he wasn't listening to God's vision. God didn't want him to be looking at the roof of the tent. God wanted him to be looking at the stars that he promised him. And see, I just believe tonight that God doesn't want you to be looking at where you currently are. God has more for you. God has called you for more. God has graced you for more. The journey isn't finished yet. The journey for Northport Church isn't finished yet. It's actually only just starting. The journey for you hasn't finished yet where you are. There's actually more in store for you. You're called for more. And I think the Spirit of God says tonight, keep going. He says, I'm with you. He says, there's total victory in my name. Not partial victory, but there's total victory. I mean, I just want us tonight now. I just wanted to have some time just to pray together, and just to pray for anyone who may have stopped pounding the ground a bit, who may have dropped the arrows down and may have just got content with where they were, and maybe just the opposition and the battles that come against them has actually tired you out a bit. I mean, I just want to pray for people to actually pick back up the arrows, and to keep on pounding, and to actually keep on believing that God's got more, and that God's not finished with you, and that we're going deeper, and that we're going to go farther, and we're going to go through. And I just think it'd be just really, really great. I mean, if actually anyone in here tonight feels like, you know what, I actually want